and welcome to this week's Product People event. Before starting, please remember that you can watch the stream on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and also Twitch. This talk will also be recorded, so if you want to share it afterwards with your fellow PMs or just head out to our YouTube channel for any discussions, you're free to do so. Here we also have a Slido link as well as a Slido code that you can head out to. We will be asking some questions. We will also be taking some questions as we talk with our speaker today. And feel free to ask any questions throughout the sessions, and we will be happy to answer. I will wait a few more seconds to make sure we're live everywhere and a few more people are joining. And then we can take it forward. All right. Cool. I think we are live everywhere. Cool. Today's speaker is Alex, who's a senior product leader with 10 plus years of experience in scaling product organizations from C to IPO, and he is currently he's the head of product at European Payment Initiative, who's leading a fully remote product team guiding over 100 people spread across 10 countries. Alex also draws experience as a transformation consultant, product manager, and a developer. He's the author of Head of Product Playbook and the book Remotely Productive. Before I hand it over to Alex for his very insightful talk, just a little bit about me and also a little bit about product people. I am Batul. I have about now 8+ years of experience in product management. I've worked in B2B and B2C. I will be the host for this session today. And a bit about product people. So our mission is to help companies discover and deliver greater products faster. We do interim product management services. We empower our product management community to share knowledge generously while managing hands-on work as a product manager, owner, and product leaders on a fractional basis. We onboard fast, align teams, and deliver greater outcomes thanks to our full in-house team, which is now consisting of 40 plus product managers. We also curate free events like this one for one of the biggest PM communities in Europe, and that has over 60,000 members. All right. We do have a small quiz or small poll before we start, and so the question is, what do you think? How do you think AI will change the role of our product manager? And we do have couple of options here. PM work will become more strategic, less execution work. Or do you think PM will need strong technical and AI understanding, how AI works, etc.? What is machine learning, for example, etc.? Do you think PM's role will shrink significantly? PM workload will increase or will it decrease? Or do you think that PM workload will remain the same? Or do you think not much will change from a strategic point of view, from an execution point of view? We will wait. And if you haven't yet gone to Slido, we do have a QR code as well as a code here. You can also head to Slido right now. Okay, let's just wait a few minutes, a minute or two for more answers, and then you can also move ahead. All right. So far, we have a 50-50 split between option A and option B. That is, PMs will become more strategic, and some of us think that PMs will need a strong technical and an AI understanding. Um, the Slido link remains. We can check back again. But in the meanwhile, I think we can also hand it over to Alex, and yeah.
Great. Thanks, Batul.
I'll stop sharing.
Okay. So thanks everyone for joining. I want to start off the talk with a little story because back in December, I got this WhatsApp message from my neighbor, Frank. Frank lives downstairs from me in Berlin. And he said, it's written in German, but what he's saying is, hey, I'm your neighbor. There's a problem in the bathroom, in the smaller bath with the shower. There's water dripping down from the roof. And I think it's coming from your bathroom upstairs. And so Frank, and he sends me a picture of the water coming into his bathroom. And he says, I've reached out to the landlord and the landlord's going to take care of it. Please don't use your bathroom. And so the landlord sent out some different companies to figure out what's going on. And my bathroom looks completely fine to me. And these companies say, oh, there's hidden leaks behind the tiles. We'll have to tear up the bathroom, but we'll come back to do that. And don't use the bathroom. And so I was like, okay, I don't want leaking to happen, going downstairs. So, and this is Berlin. So surprisingly, the nothing happens after this. So a couple months pass and no one is coming to repair the bathroom and we can't use it. And so I was really frustrated. I sent some emails to my landlord and they didn't respond to the emails. I tried calling, they didn't call back. And so finally I was like, I can use Claude for this. And so I went into Claude and I said, Claude, write me a letter to my landlord in German, because my German's pretty good, but not that good for writing a very formal letter. And I said, make it feel stern because they haven't been responding, and demand a rent reduction and demand they fix the problem. And so Claude generates this very nice formal email that I had to iterate a couple times on it, give it some feedback, correct some things, but I printed it out, I mailed it to them, I sent it off. I felt much better. I'm pretty good at German, but this is beyond my abilities. And I'm really hoping my landlord gets the bathroom fixed because now it's been about 4 months. But I think all of us have had experiences like this with AI. It was something that was a little beyond our abilities that we asked the AI to do, and it just did something that we couldn't have done on our own. And I was curious, and I want to try this and ask you to type in the chat if you can. Who here has had an experience like this with AI where you've used it personally for a task and suddenly you just got a result that was well beyond what you could do? So we'll see if people can type some of these things in the chat. And I'd love to get 1 or 2 examples. It's a bit of an experiment whether this comes through correctly. So I'll pause for just a brief moment and see if anything comes in. I don't know, Batul, if you've had any experiences like this you want to share, it's up to you. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here. But I see you on my screen, so it's tempting to talk.
Of course, I can share. So we recently had a very complicated Excel sheet with a lot of formulas and everything, and I just wanted to make sense of it, right? And so I asked AI again to make me a diagram or flow of all the things that the AI can see and everything, and it made me a really, really cool flowchart with all of the fields connecting to one another, which made my understanding really, really easy. So that's something that I can share.
Yeah, it feels great when that happens. I think you just feel like you have a superpower or something. And yeah, so I think there's it seems there's a 30-second delay for LinkedIn to post the messages to the chat. So please feel free to put them in. Peter's saying he used it to plan a trip to a new city. So now a couple of them are coming in. So I think we've all had this kind of really positive AI experience, and then and I think this is a challenge for us when it comes to transforming our organizations. Yeah, using it for email writing as a non-native speaker, that's a really good one too. Anytime I need help and I don't want to, I want to look like I'm more articulate in German, it's definitely helpful for that. The challenge with this, though, is that our personal experiences like this with AI, they kind of give us the wrong intuition about AI for our organizations. And I would argue this positive side is actually why we're struggling to really transform our orgs for AI. And I think that this kind of individual use and individual separate, we're getting a couple more answers in, looking at health issues, building a conference website. Yeah, so these are definitely things we can do amazingly well really fast. I think the website generation is super, super exciting when that happens in just a matter of a minute or less. So, but our personal experience, I'm going to argue, is giving us the wrong intuition about AI for our organizations. And this individual experimentation that we do when we're given AI tools at work is a start, but it's not enough. And I'm going to argue in this talk that transforming the product org for AI is a collaborative challenge. And so it's one where we have to work together. And for this to work well, the biggest challenge is that PMs actually need the time, because I view PMs at the core of the transformation. They have the context to drive it, and they need time to drive the transformation together. And so we'll talk about that all in more detail as we go forward. I want to give two quick disclaimers. One is these are my opinions; these are not my employer's opinions. I'm talking generally about what I've observed, but it's not the reflection of my employer's opinions. The other is that this talk is kind of a part one talk, and you might find that you're further along in the learning journey. And so if you're in a situation where you're already talking about how do we want to balance our spend on compute with engineering headcount, if your organization's that far, you may find this talk's a little early. But I think for a lot of organizations, they're struggling with these challenges of about how do we really plan the transformation? How do we make changes at scale? So what I'm going to cover in the talk, I'll go into more about how the AI transformation is nothing like the personal AI usage we're experiencing. We're also going to talk about the pressures we're all experiencing around AI and how PMs respond to those pressures. I'm going to talk about, you may know about systems 1 and 2, but I'm going to talk about systems 1, 2, and 3 for the brain and this idea of external cognition. We'll talk about what stops larger established organizations from acting like AI native startups. But then we'll also go into how established orgs can create the conditions they need for faster transformation. And I'll finish with some concrete actions to get started. So with that, let's go into how our personal AI use misleads us. In the end, it's about context. I think some key facts about the landlord letter situation that I have. This is actually a low stakes situation, right? If it doesn't work, I can just try again. I can send a not very good letter to my landlord that makes up some laws that don't exist. It's not going to be a problem if it doesn't work, because I can correct this pretty easily. The other thing is the AI didn't work autonomously on this. So I actually did provide quick feedback for the AI. So I was present there. I adjusted the output. I had time and energy to read what it wrote. It's also a fairly standard problem, right? Renter disputes happen all over the world. There's probably letters about this in the training material that the model got, right? So there's existing defined way of approaching a dispute with a landlord around a leak not being fixed. And ultimately, it's safe to get it wrong, right? If something goes wrong with this, there's no consequence significantly for me, except maybe my landlord thinks I'm a little strange. So it's quite a safe situation. And I think when we think about what we're dealing with at work as product managers and product leaders, PMs face very different challenges, right? We're building new things, and often the company has never done it before. I mean, sometimes you're trying again because the company hasn't succeeded in the past, but often these are new things that your company hasn't done. And the context is not written down or easily available. So most of what we do, the knowledge about what needs to be done is spread across many minds, might be spread across people in different organizations and different systems. And a lot of the work of a PM is finding that hidden information that was not written down and extracting it and getting it early enough that they can respond to it. And I think the other thing that's really tough about product management is that you go to any of these talks, people who are like me are talking about experimentation and how we have to learn and we have to adapt. Your stakeholders often don't expect you to get things wrong. So your stakeholders are expecting you to get things right a lot of the time. And so there's often not the same level of safety I had with my letter to my landlord. And I think when we think about adopting AI at work, I want to talk about 4 different puzzles that PMs hold the context around, because I think this will help us understand why AI transformation in many cases hasn't yet had the effect we want. There are more puzzles, but these are 4 that I think are definitely relevant to PMs. The first one is what I call the market puzzle. So this is, how is our organization in the market that we're in, how is AI changing the market we're in? Maybe it's increasing competition. Maybe it's changing competition or making it more or less relevant. Maybe the whole market might go away because of AI. This is a core part of product management, is being aware of the market and what's changing and talking about it. And a lot of that information, although we can ask our AI tools to go research markets, and they actually can surface a lot of interesting information fast, getting a complete picture is quite tricky. The second puzzle is the customer value puzzle. So how might we use AI to create more value for our customers? And so if your investors or your shareholders are coming and saying, you need to add AI to your product right now, this is what they expect. They expect you to put something into the product that is valuable to your customers. And I think the challenge is that often, we intend to look at the customer journey and the jobs to be done and identify opportunities for improvement in light of those things. But sometimes with AI pressure, we're not going as deep into the customer value puzzle as we should be. We're just getting pressure to glue things into the product. And the next 2 puzzles that I think are relevant, one is the product value stream puzzle. So how do we go to market faster? How do we do our whole product lifecycle faster? How do we bring capabilities to the market better? How do we learn faster? And then finally, the engineering value stream puzzle, which is how do we work with engineering to change the way development is done? As they're using agents more in engineering, how do we make this safe for our business? So the thing about these puzzles is they're not easy in any way. None of these things can be solved quickly, and none of these things can be solved on a pure solo basis by a single PM using Claude. I think we can explore these things on a solo basis, but any of these things is going to require significant work across the organization, across multiple teams. And I think those orgs that have a continuous improvement practice already are going to have an easier time with this. I think the other thing is, like, when you look at these 4 things, you see that PMs are in the middle of all these 4 puzzles, right? So any transformation that's going to profoundly increase the product org effectiveness has to be done with the PMs, because they're the holders of the context for all of these, for these puzzles. The problem, though, is that PMs are under too much pressure, and this is not new, right? PMs have been under pressure as long as I've been doing product management. This is just the nature of product management. Is you're under pressure. That's kind of why we like it, right? That we enjoy the challenge of being under pressure and finding the way forward and leading our teams. And AI adds a little bit to that pressure. When there's this request to find ways to integrate AI into your work. But the PMs are also, I've noticed the best ones are highly attuned to what the organization wants. So, and that's not always AI adoption, right? Because if you're a PM, you're spending your every day with your sales team, with customer support, with your customers, with execs, with your development team. And all of these people want you to keep the existing business running. And this takes real time. And so the tendency for a PM is going to be to try to keep the current business running and just use AI to improve that a little bit, right? It's not I think most PMs find themselves in a situation where they're expected to deliver, they're expected to drive metrics, and this AI thing is coming in on top. And so it's like, how can I use AI to deliver a little bit better what I'm doing? As a result of this, I see I've been thinking about what I observe in the organizations, and I think there are 3 archetypes that I see that are, I think, worth talking about in this talk. And so I'm going to go into these 3. You may think of some more as I'm talking, or other ways PMs are reacting to the moment. So if you have those ideas, type them in the chat. But I'll talk about the 3 that I've been thinking of. The first is what I'm calling the silent superhero. Claude helped me come up with this name. And the silent superhero is someone who's augmented with AI. So this is a product person who's getting more done, and they've found a way to just do it quietly. They're moving faster and faster. And sometimes they're moving faster than the organization around them, right? They're maybe creating a lot of documents that look super impressive, but people aren't getting time to read. And they're really focused on moving very quickly. And it's, you look at this and you're like, wow, how do you do that? They're often not speeding the organization up, only themselves though. And I think the thing, if you've watched the Superman movies, you know that while Superman does save the day, he often leaves quite a mess behind. And I think that's one of the things that can happen with the silent superhero archetype. The next one I'm calling the quiet coaster. And this guy is Tim Ferriss. He wrote a book called The 4-Hour Workweek, which, if you don't know it, his idea was, if you outsource aspects of your job to people in lower wage parts of the world, you can actually complete your job in just a few hours a week, and then you can use the rest of the time for whatever you want. And I think, that there are definitely people who are saying, I can use AI to take up part of my job, and that will free time for me and reduce my work week. I can respond to any problems gradually, and I maybe can work a little bit less. And I think this is definitely a response we see. And sadly, it can be an adaptive response if you find yourself in an organization that doesn't really reward impact or productivity. Some people, choose this and they're like, this is the best thing for me. I can make my workday a little bit easier, and I can be under a little bit less stress. So this is one archetype I see. And then the third one is what I'm calling the fire hose drinker, again, based on Claude's advice. The fire hose drinker is chatting with AI all day long, and they've got multiple windows open to different AI tools. They've got maybe multiple agents running, and they're just overloading themselves with information. And you can see when you talk to them, they're just stressed. Their brain is really stressed. They're operating on pure amygdala. They're probably not sleeping very well, and they're just getting exhausted. But they're like, if I just automate enough of my job with AI, it's gonna get much better. But you can see it's just not working for them. And I think the trap with all three of these archetypes is that they're all taking this individual productivity focus. The problem is we know that individual productivity does not lead to org productivity. And I think this is a really important point, and this is why simply giving the team tools and tools and tokens is not enough. AI can make us faster, but when we accelerate single points in the value stream, this doesn't speed up the whole. It's like if you think about an auto manufacturing company that had the ability to instantly manufacture an unlimited number of oil pan washers, right? This doesn't help the company because suddenly you have way more than you need. You've got to find a place to store them. In the end, we need to aim our optimizations towards the bottlenecks in the system. And this is nothing new, right? The lean people have been talking about this for decades. I think what's weird about the moment we're in is that for some reason, like everybody is choosing to sub-optimize. And so I want to talk a little bit about what's blocking us from really transforming our organizations. Why are we choosing to act this way? And I'm going to ask this question again for the chat. What do you think our three archetypes all have in common? And given the 30-second delay, I'd love you to type them into the chat. I'm going to pause for a second to let you type, and then I'm going to move on quickly to my theory. I think what these three are all experiencing is actually fear. I think that it's a different kind of fear for each one. And I'm going to dig into this fear a little bit because I think this is the dynamic. We don't talk about fear so much in product management, but I think it is a sort of hidden factor in a lot of the strange behaviors that we see. We've got the silent superhero, and for him, he has this feeling of, okay, I found a way to move really fast. I'm ahead of the pack. If I reveal my secrets to all my colleagues, I'm going to lose my advantage. And then if we end up with a layoff, I might lose my job. I need this advantage to stay ahead, at least to stay ahead of those other guys. So there's fear here of losing the advantage. the quiet coaster. The Tim Ferriss character has this feeling, okay, if people find out about my approach, I'm just going to get pushed to start working more hours. And like, I could do that, but I don't think this organization can make use of that. We're pretty dysfunctional. So it's better for me to just keep quiet and hopefully, just go with the status quo. Then we've got the fire hose drinker, and I think, there's a lot of people in this mode. I feel like all of us have this fear a little bit. If I stop using AI or if I don't use it enough, I will fall behind forever. And that's it. It will all be over. And Peter's had typed in the chat, all three work solo. And I think that is really the core of this and what we're going to talk about more. So thanks, Peter, for that. Dramatic as any of these three, but I think it's relevant. Back in September, I had a portfolio council meeting with my executive stakeholders, and I was busy afterwards. I had a bunch of meetings, and I needed to get the minutes done. And so I decided to give Microsoft Copilot a copy of the transcript to summarize. And those of you who are saddled with Microsoft Copilot will know how bad that is. It's not the strongest tool for writing summaries compared to the other tools we have available. But it made a quick summary. It listed some decisions and actions, and it invented some decisions and actions that I had to then delete from the summary. And it just wasn't a great summary. It didn't capture the feeling of the meeting, but I didn't have much time. And I was like, honestly, not many people are going to read the minutes. And we didn't, I just posted it into Confluence. I took out the obvious mistakes, but just dropped it into Confluence. I didn't mention that I used AI to generate it because we didn't have an agreement at that time about how we were using AI. And I sort of didn't want to get into it, especially not with my senior stakeholders. And it's not that I thought it would have been bad. I was just busy. I didn't have time to dig into this conversation with them. I felt like I got to keep moving. And so it was definitely fear of is this okay for me to be asking AI to do this part of my job for me? Is it something I should be scrutinizing the minutes in detail? I just didn't, I was a little afraid of getting sucked into that at that moment. And so it's a very subtle thing, but rather than help my team and say, claiming this is a use of AI, I just claimed it as my own work. And I really stopped us from having an opportunity to learn together, because I could have said, here's an AI generated summary. I looked it over. It looks okay. What did I miss? What did it miss? I just silently moved on, and it became yet another extra document in our systems that was AI generated of questionable quality. And I think there's this interesting thing about the busyness that we all have, and the way we move intensely through our days that has an effect on us. And I think in a lot of cases, fear can short circuit the PM's brain. When we're stressed out, when we're busy, we start to look for shortcuts. And we have this wonderful tool that gives us a huge number of shortcuts. I got a message from Tony Anna Maria of the Modus Institute. They help organizations with transformations. And in her newsletter, she was talking about what happens to our brain when we're stressed out. And she said that basically the prefrontal cortex gets flooded with neurotransmitters. And that means that our executive function goes down. So the part of our brain that's supposed to be planning and organizing and memorizing and learning, these start to disappear when we're under stress. And so I think it's important to recognize the effect of this on our teams. Now, I think a lot of you will be familiar with Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. He talked years ago about how our brains work in two modes. There's the fast system, system one. This is the intuition that operates without thinking. And then there's the slower system two, the deliberative system. And so when we're under stress, we're naturally pushed more in the intuitive direction. We have less time and energy for deliberation. It turns out there's a third system now. There's an article that just came out written by Shaw and Nave, who are at the Wharton School. And they've said we have to think about this model differently. Times have changed. And now there's a system three, which is artificial cognition. So this is when we ask something outside our brain to think for us. And this bypasses not only our intuition, both our deliberation and our intuition. And we have to make a decision about how we want to process the things that are under artificial cognition. And they say there's like a sort of good form of artificial cognition they call cognitive offloading, where we try to offload some work to the AIs. But then there's also cognitive surrender, where we actually just give up to the AIs. We say, okay, I'm going to give you this task, and I'm not going to review it. I'm just going to use whatever the AI comes up with. And I think we've all had moments where we've been like, oh, okay, like I'm pretty sure what's coming out of this thing is pretty good. Do I need to read it before I pass it on? It's like, and I was just talking to a former colleague who's a VP of engineering, and we were talking about how we both have this pull to just like go with the output at times when we think it's probably good enough. And I think this relates to this challenge we find ourselves in. And another article from the Harvard Business Review is talking about this challenge that we find when we use AI more and more. If you've had one of these great sessions where you're back and forth with the AI, framing your ideas and figuring things out, you may have experienced this one where the finance director said, "I've been back and forth. I've been synthesizing data, forming and organizing the flows of pillars and work, but then I couldn't even comprehend if what I'd created made any sense, and I had to just stop. I had to close the laptop and revisit it the next day when I could think again." And I think that there's definitely that feeling of your brain gets saturated after certain types of AI use. This is important because this question of like, what do we offload? This is the trade-off behind every AI productivity boost we're trying to get in a product. And fundamentally, we have limited cognitive capacity, right? Each of us does. Even those of you who are very, very smart still have limited cognitive capacity. And when we rely on AI to take on our cognitive load, we've got to decide, are we going to review everything, which is costly from a cognitive perspective, and sometimes it feels like reviewing is just as hard as doing it ourselves. Or do we choose to delegate the detailed understanding to the AI, which is risky, depending on how good the context is? And so, if we really want to accelerate our orgs and move more cognitive work to AI, we need to talk about how we're going to govern it. And I think it's very hard to do this as an individual, right? Even regardless of what role you are in, the complexity of this question of what decisions are going to AI, it's really a design problem. And what are product managers good at? Solving design problems. So again, this is I think a great opportunity for us to engage with our organizations to talk about what cognitive tasks we want to move. I want to talk briefly about the difference with AI native startups, because if you talk to them, they're in a very different world. And as an example, my friend Amr, I don't know if he's on the call or not, Amr runs an AI native startup. And so for him, it's very small, a handful of people. And so it's just natural for him to automate as much as possible with AI. He's using Claude Code to automate things. He even started with his new tool called Paperclip, where he set up agents for different aspects of the business and KPIs for all of them. And he's really early in the process of creating his business, and he's still got tons of flexibility. He doesn't need to get approval for any automation. He just does it. He just does it. He works with his colleagues, or he even informs them about something that he's automated. And I think this is a very different situation from an established organization, right? When we're working with a bigger existing company, we've got a bunch of hesitant colleagues. We've got a bunch of assurance parties, data protection officers, all these people who are concerned about making sure that the business moves in a safe way. And then we've also got the established business, which takes our attention. We've got our customer base, and I mean, we have advantages over the new startups because we have customers, we have real market position to protect. But this is why I believe that the transformation is a collaborative challenge, because it's not a question of just do it. It's a question of, how should we do it? Where are the risks? When should we do it? And these are things we need to work with all these other groups on. And these are things that are not easy. It's funny though, talking to Amr, he sent me a text the other day and he said, some good news. He said more and more, because Amr used to work in large enterprises. And he said more and more, we're learning that the same things that help humans work together, help agents work together. So the same things that help product managers be effective are quite important for agents. Clear expectations for what's needed, feedback about those expectations and whether they're realistic, agreements about when and how to communicate, and regular rhythms for check-in on different topics. So I think the good news is that the further you go down the road, it's not that these things are completely strange to us. So let's talk about creating the conditions for transformation. So what is necessary for teams to work together on the 4 AI puzzles in a safe way? I think there are 3 emotional conditions we need to think about. First, we have to address the fear. This fear is there, whether we talk about it or not. It's better to just start talking about it. And there are fears that people have that they're not talking about, but in the end, we're at this great moment of change and uncertainty and opportunity. We have the option of working together with our teams on it and being open about how we're doing with it. And we really need to address the fears head on, and that involves really digging into safety. We also have to make it safe to be wrong. This is hard in certain businesses, right? There's a lot of businesses where there's the culture does not allow for being wrong, and I think that means that some of our experimentation and discussion has to be outside of the core production workflows. Some of our learning, if you're in a high criticality industry where you're not able to take on a huge amount of additional risk, we need to create environments in those worlds where it is safe to be wrong. And we also need to make time for learning, and this means this slowing down to speed up. And I'm going to come back to this one a little bit later. So when we think about the conditions we're creating beyond the emotional ones, I think there's a few that are really important. One is an information-rich context for performance. When I talk to the engineers on the team, one of the things I hear is, the thing that really helps agents on the coding side is having access to supporting materials that I can point them to that are trustworthy. So it's, going beyond the story, going to the feature definition, going to understand the other initiative goals. If I can offer the agents this additional guidance, the engineering work is much faster and more efficient. The second, goal clarity. So really getting to the point where we're good at setting goals and we're improving the process of setting goals, because the more we work with AI, the more we realize this feedback is super important, and clear goals are really important. And ultimately having a forecasting and measurement practice where we say, here's what we think is going to happen before we release a feature or do an action, and then a measurement practice to look at the results. Also, I think it's really important that we have good feedback loops in place, so that we can, when we do learn, we have the ability to tell our management what we have learned and have the ability to change. And finally, we need time to work on all of this. So obviously, these are not new things. This is not the most exciting slide in my deck, I think, but if you've been building a modern product organization, you should be in good shape for these things. But if you're in an organization that's been centralizing planning and doing, global task assignment and focusing on outputs, it's going to be much harder to adapt. And the interesting thing is, depending on how your financing works, I think there are some businesses that will be okay for a couple of years that aren't adapting. And I think the question for all of us as product professionals is, given the world is changing fast, are we going to start to adapt now or later as individuals? Let's talk about the time problem. I think there's a great book by L. David Marquette called Leadership is Language, and he talks a lot about how your words as a leader have a huge impact on everyone else. And inside of that book, he talks about 2 kinds of work that organizations do, red work and blue work. So red work is the execution work, it's the delivery, it's the doing. And then blue work is more reflection, learning, planning, and seeing. And what Marquette says is it's really important to keep, to manage the balance and moving back and forth between these 2 modes. And so we see some organizations that really focus heavily on the red work. They're just all about action. They take no time to reflect. There's also some organizations that take way too much time to plan and never get into execution. And so the book is a lot about how do I keep those things in balance? How often do we move between these 2 modes? And I think if you are leading your organization in that red work mode all the time, if you're in that pure execution mode, you're not going to be able to adapt to the moment, because I think the challenges of reformulating a product organization for AI are so profound that without that time, you're only going to get that individual solo optimization. So what can we do as product leaders? I'm going to answer this question twice, once for senior product leaders and then once for PMs, because I think we all have a role to play here. Yeah, working fast and slow, that's a great way to think about it. Maybe that's a good book to write, Peter. So for senior product leaders, I think that the biggest challenge is planning the time for the 4 puzzles, right? Because these are not things that you can solve in one discussion or delegate to one person. And I think for each organization, the 4 puzzles take different priority. So you may be in a market that's being actively disrupted, and you need to talk about the market puzzle every single week. Or you might be in a situation where the biggest puzzle for you to talk about is, how are we going to work with our engineers' agentic coding practices and make this safe in production, because production keeps crashing, right? You need to, so ultimately you may have different priorities in how frequently you're talking about each of these puzzles, but you have to make a decision about how often are we going to come together and actually bring the PMs together to discuss what we're doing. I think the next thing is simply gathering the team to talk about what everyone's learning. This is something we started doing in the fall. We set up a regular Lean Coffee meeting. So Lean Coffee is a format where you get together with a group, you prioritize topics together, and then you spend a limited amount of time on each one and decide together how long you want to spend on each one. It doesn't really matter what the format is. I think just creating a space where people can come together and discuss what they're learning about AI is really important. When we did this, I found there were a set of PMs who I had no idea were using AI so extensively, that were actually the leaders in AI usage and had tons of great ideas and simply didn't know where to go with these ideas to make them happen. And we also, it's surprising what's going on inside of our teams and what people are doing on a solo basis. I think the challenge is, how do you discuss that and discuss what are we actually going to do about this? This is not a one-time thing, right? This is an ongoing journey that we're all joining. So it needs to be a conversation that goes on. And I think the last thing for senior product leaders is you really need to normalize talking about your own personal use of AI. And this is something I got from my former colleague, Christine Hudson. And she said leaders are not talking enough about their own use. And so people think talking about AI is off limits. And so this means really admitting to your team, hey, I just used AI to generate this set of goals. Are they any good? Instead of saying here's a draft of the goals. So in light of this, I want to say, how did I use AI to support creating this talk? I wrote down what did I do in generating this talk. It's not an AI generated talk, but I definitely did have a lot of interaction with Claude. Claude came up with my 3 archetype names because mine weren't very good. And I think by sharing how you're using AI, you open people up to give you feedback. Somebody can say, hey, Alex, you used AI to generate the slides. Actually, I didn't, but you used AI to generate the slides, and they're not very good. Maybe that's not the best use of AI. Maybe we should actually get a designer to help you out with your slides next time. And I think when we are open about our own use of AI at work, others can talk about it a bit more too, and we can start a discussion about what's working and not working, and actually start to talk about the slop that's appearing everywhere and whether we want to have it or not. So for product managers, it's a fairly similar list. I think the thing I want to say is that I know a lot of PMs are being faced with this mandate to add AI features to your product from stakeholders who are concerned. And I think hopefully the 4 puzzles can give you a different way to think about responding to that pressure. I think that often our stakeholders are concerned that we're not responding to AI enough, but we can respond in different ways. We can respond with conversations about the market. We can respond with conversations about our value stream. And I think we don't have to just take their feature ideas. We can, and so consider using these 4 puzzles as a way to reframe those requests and talk about what really matters. You can gather your own team also to talk about what everyone's learning. This conversation is great with just 2 or 3 PMs too. And then also normalize talking about your own personal use of AI. You can say, I used Rovo to generate these stories. Are they crap? I created a tool to help with user problem analysis. Does anyone else want to try it? Or I'm saving auto-generated meeting summaries here. Does anyone else want to contribute to this? I think if we start to approach the AI transformation collaboratively, we can do all of this in a much more humane way. Humane for our customers, I think for the broader society, and for our teams. And it's my hope that this AI transformation is done in a way that recognizes humans. And I think we all have a choice to make about whether we make that happen. So that's my talk. I want to leave a brief slide up on some further reading of some books that I think might be useful for all of you, and that you may or may not have seen some of them so far. And I think that Batul, I think we have some way of gathering questions from the audience and responding to those.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for the very insightful talk. These are some of the problems that we face every day, right? We want to be efficient, but we also want to know how to do it in a way that the entire company benefits from it, or it meets the organizational goals, right? All right, let me share my screen again, just so we have the Slido in place. All right. Cool. So thank you everybody for listening. We are taking questions now. And anything you want to ask, Alex? All right. I think we do have a few questions. I will read them out loud, and then you can also answer them. What parts of the PM role do you believe will completely disappear in the next 2 to 3 years because of AI?
This is an interesting one. The PM role is different in every company. And so I would argue that different companies are moving at very different speeds. And so in 2 or 3 years, you will probably be able to find a different company that's moving at the speed you are of your current organization. So I don't think any particular parts of the role are going to completely disappear across the industry. I think obviously the way we work with our teams is changing, right? And the faster as agentic coding starts to work more effectively, and as the amount of development that can happen increases, I don't see that reducing the demand on PMs. I see that just increasing the demand on PMs. And then suddenly, we may have more of an imbalance between PMs and engineers. And that means that engineers need to start picking up more PM tasks. But I don't think the PM work is going to go away. But yeah, I just think it's such a broad role. I can't really make a prediction about what would completely disappear. I'd love to, if people have ideas in the chat, I'd love to see them.
Absolutely. We do have a couple more questions. So, are we moving towards PMs being more like mini founders or more like orchestrators of AI systems?
I think sorry to say both, but I think both of these are possibilities, right? I think, I don't know, I spent a little time thinking about, because I was an engineer in the beginning, and I was thinking, is this a moment where I should go back to engineering? Should I become an engineer again, even though I've been away from it for 10 years or more? And I don't think the need for software engineering is going to go away. I think we will still be interacting with software engineers who are orchestrating AI systems, because the complexity of that is still rather high. Mm-hmm. I think that there's always the question about how many teams can a PM handle, at once. And I think I think a PM can handle 1 or 2 teams without a great deal of problem, but a PM with 4 teams starts to have trouble. And so that we may see that stretching in the same way as the engineers are covering more ground. I think that the mini founder question has a lot to do with the structure of your organization and the extent to which you're connected with the finding product market fit problem, right? So if you're in a company that's doing a lot of finding product market fit, then of course the PMs are going to be more like mini founders. I think. I don't know. My theory is that software engineering is still a real thing, even though agents can do quite a lot of impressive stuff, and it will still be a very strong specialty. My impression is that I think software engineers will be typing less, but working just as much. And that's actually interesting. That vibe coding book that came out in October by Gene Kim and Steve Yegi, I really recommend it because they give a good perspective on what's changing in software engineering. For me, it made me much more comfortable about my role as a PM, having read that book.
Yeah. And it also is somewhat similar to how it is for product managers, I think, because as product managers, you can use AI for a lot of things. But as you mentioned, there is, you reach a point where you don't understand exactly what you started off with or what exactly is. So then you need to bring in some thinking again, right? So there is part of PM knowledge or thinking or strategic thinking that you have to bring into your work. It's similar to software engineering as well, I think, because you can ask AI to build you code, but then you do need the knowledge, the core development work to also understand what exactly is going on and how to maybe fix it.
Yeah, I think the engineers are going to get more demanding of us, and they're going to ask for more clarity about goals and more specificity about success measures and this kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. There is another question. Is AI actually making PMs lazy by doing thinking for them?
Well, I mean, I covered it a little bit in the talk. I think that a good PM has to cover a lot of ground, right? It's a very broad role where you're doing a lot of different things, and so you have to be efficient with your time, and you have to avoid tasks that are time sinks. And so I think that it's very tempting to offload your cognition to AI, let the AI do the thinking, and I think, especially depending on where you are in the organization and what you're working on, I think sometimes the organizations let us get away with sloppy thinking. And so I think if the organization allows sloppy thinking, then PMs will provide sloppy thinking. Because again, we're very attuned to what the organization wants with us. If the organization expects us to be rigorous and consistent and stand behind the results, then the PMs are not going to be lazy. So I think if nothing else, the shift towards AI is going to be more demanding for management. It's going to expect that management is more coherent and that management is more consistent in its talking, and hopefully that helps PMs to do the right thing. That said, you're going to have PMs who are cutting corners and like I said, just passing off AI content that's not very good, and that's something that will only stop if you start to talk about it with them. And really say, hey, we see what's happening. I'm pretty sure you didn't write that 40-page document yourself. Who is it for, really? So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right. There are a couple of more questions. I think we can take one or two more before we need to wrap up. So, do you see AI orchestration manager replacing the PM role, or say PMs moving into that role? Managing products, processes, business has been expanded to managing agents as well now.
I mean, in the longer term, certainly this is possible. I think at the moment we're in, we don't know that much yet about consistently orchestrating agents, right? I think, and I think the software engineers are on the front lines with this, and it's still really hard to keep 10 agents going without supervision, to keep sufficient context in place. And I think it's still, we can and should join that discussion, but I think there's still a question of what are the basic rules for orchestrating agents? And a friend of mine was saying, I'm really frustrated because I just spent 3 weeks, pursuing an orchestration approach, and then suddenly things changed and everything I was doing was completely wrong, and I had to throw it out, and I have no hope of ever keeping up with the rate of change in this. And I think it's true of all of us, right? This whole movement is moving so fast. The only way we can keep up is if we use multiple people on our team and their ability to sense what's going on. So I don't think that, I think we have a little bit of time to work out how orchestration works. I think But I think we have opportunities as PMs. PM is really a role that can move in many directions, and often you can find your way into a new role from being a PM. And I think there may be a window in your organization where you can help with things, and that may mean a different role for you. And I think if you see that opportunity and you want to do it, you should take it. But I think, I think that when it comes to designing new agent-driven processes, PMs are going to be on the front lines probably before the operations departments are. Although, to be honest, everyone can build simple utilities now very fast, regardless of their level of technical ability. That doesn't mean they're scalable or reliable, but our colleagues in operations and finance can build tools very quickly now. And I think it's going to be an interesting time from that perspective.
Thank you, Alex. I think we have one more question, but we can send it over to you. I think we are almost at time. So if you're okay, we can also start wrapping up now.
Yeah, sounds fine.
All right, cool. I will speak a little bit about product people towards the end. So the use cases that we cover are we do fractional support or interim support for product managers or product leaders. So, for example, if there is a permanent position that needs to be filled, and usually hiring takes about 3 to 9 months per role. There are parental. If you have any parental leave coming up, we can also help support there. If there are, for example, important and urgent initiatives that does not need a full-time PM, but an interim PM, that's exactly where we come in. We also do coaching and advisory. So we can coach your team. We can also do product ops from 0 to 1 in hypergrowth or at scale. We also are product discovery experts. So we also look at market use cases, jobs to be done, models, etc. And we run a low or no code pilot or MVP to help accelerate PM services. These are some of our B2C clients and some of our B2B clients. So we are present in both the type of industries. All right, some stats. So we have supported over 690 plus cross-functional teams. We are a team of 40 product leaders and product managers. We have around 59% women in the team and 60% of the women in the leadership. And yeah, that's it. If you have any more questions for us, please feel free to add them in Slido. And I think that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Alex, for a very insightful talk. It was also really fun to learn new things.
Yeah, thanks for jumping